Welcome to Positive Perspectives, a podcast dedicated to sharing powerful stories that presents opportunities to grow from lived experiences. Each week we speak to expert guests who bring thought-provoking topics, meaningful lessons, or stories that spark transformation and deeper understanding. Today I'm joined by Coretta Hine, a coach, mentor, trainer, and diversity and inclusion consultant. She currently serves as president of the EMCC UK and is founder of Coretta Coaching and Consultancy. Her mission is to help women unlock their true purpose and potential. Hi, Coretta. Welcome to Positive Perspectives.
Hi, Marie. Thanks very much for inviting me onto your podcast.
Can you tell us a bit more about yourself and what you're going to be sharing today?
So I'm a coach, mentor, trainer, and I've worked sort of in the public sector for over 30 years. And coaching has always been something that I've done, coaching and mentoring, more on an informal basis. And then I got into it professionally after finishing my sort of public sector career. But I'm a mum. I've got two adult children now. So I've worked on bringing up a family. I'm married, and my coaching profession now and sort of being a business owner. Yeah, very sort of, I suppose, mixed bag of life experience, and especially working on my own and then working in the public sector as well.
Thank you for that. So this is a journey about transformation and managing, juggling life as well. And when you were talking before, when we had a discussion before, you were talking about transformation that begins within. It would be lovely to hear a bit more about that.
Well, I think for me, that transformation that begins within is something that I think for a lot of us, we kind of don't necessarily think about, or we maybe don't realise that actually it's the inner work that's the most powerful and most important, because that's what leads to us being authentic. That's what leads to us bringing out our true identity. And I find with a lot of the women that I coach and I support and mentor, that's the areas that they struggle with, is identity. Who am I? We grow up especially as women in society, and society's kind of shaped who we are. You will like pink, you'll play with dolls, and you'll have cooking and pots and all of that kind of stuff. And you go into school and you're shaped, and you go into the workplace. And by the time we get to an age where we're adults, we've kind of been shaped by society, our family, our friends, our culture. And we then get to this, well, who actually am I? And for a lot of women, they have children, and then they become the mum, they become the wife or the partner. And then it's about, again, who am I? And so a lot of women struggle with that identity piece. And what's their purpose in life? Who am I? What am I about? Why am I here? And that can be a challenge for women, especially when they're trying to succeed, trying to get on in the workplace. And there's that, I don't really know who I am. And then you've got the challenges of being a woman, so the gender challenges. And then there's intersectional challenges. You may have a disability, you may be a carer, you may be a person of colour. So you have all of these challenges in life. And then there's that, and how do I navigate that? How am I authentic in that space? How can I be truly me and get on? And so those kind of barriers that we then create in our own minds can hold us back and stop us from succeeding, stop us from achieving, and quite often stop us even going for something. It holds us back that much that we don't take that time to say, actually, I want to go for this and I'm going to go for it. And so for a lot of women, we wait until we've got everything. And sometimes by then the ship's sailed, or we've missed opportunities, don't always see those opportunities.
As you were talking, I was just reflecting on how our society distracts us with so many, as you were saying, in terms of the conditioning that we have as young girls or boys. This is how we should be. This is how we should act. And it doesn't allow for the curiosity for us to explore who we really are. Because once we've grown up, or as we grow up and we navigate ourselves through life, there are other distractions that we're told to be like this, or you should do that. And also it's imposed by others on us. And we're not in the space or the right place to say, no, these are my boundaries. This is who I am. I'm not going to take that on board. This is what I want to do. So thank you so much for sharing that. It'd be great to hear your title and also your journey.
Well, yeah, so for me, because it's Black History Month and it's about standing firm in power and pride, and for me, it was about that. How do you stand firm in that power and pride? What does that actually mean in terms of leadership and influence? Talk about these words, pride and power and what have you, but actually, what does that mean to us as individuals? And how do we stand firm in that when we're sometimes navigating a society, barriers, challenges that weren't created for us? We're sort of working in an ecosystem that wasn't necessarily designed for us and our needs, our challenges, and the way we like to live. So it's about how do we stand firm in that position of power and pride.
We were talking about a story around the inner work of leadership and liberation. Can you tell us your journey around leadership and liberation?
Sure. So I spent over 30 years in the public sector. So I was in policing in the UK. And I joined in the 90s when policing was, it sort of wasn't long after the Brixton riots and things like that. So policing, and I policed in London originally for most of my service. So it was in an environment that was, there was hostility inside and outside. So you would have fellow colleagues that would be, racist language, discriminatory language and behaviours. And then you'd have the public that would be the same. And then you would have your own community that, it was very polarised. Some would be, why have you gone in? Why have you joined? And then you'd have the other side where it was, oh, it's good to see. And we welcome it. So there was this real kind of challenge and this polarisation in being in that space and being the only one. Quite often I would walk into rooms, I would walk into meetings, into team briefings, and be the only person of colour in that space. And so there were real challenges around who you are and how you fit into that space. And I think very early on, I realised that I had three choices, and it was either assimilate and acquiesce. And so you just carry on with the jokes and the things that are being said and what's happening, or you leave, which a lot of people did and a lot of people still do now, or I challenge. Mm. And so everywhere I got the opportunity, I decided to challenge and use those teachable moments when things happen, things are said, to educate and teach. But there's a big burden that comes with that. When you're that person and you are the only one, there's a weight that comes with just being the only person in that space and having to survive in it, having to thrive in it. But then there's also that thing about being the only one who is vocal or who is speaking up. And sometimes that can bear a heavy weight. And for a lot of people, and for myself over some of the time, you become less authentic. You become less your true self because you want to fit. You don't want the hassle and the challenge. And, especially if you're somebody who has decided, I'm going to speak up, then sometimes you are compromising on your values as well. So there are times when you want to speak up, but I've spoken up so many times now that actually today I'm just going to let that one go. I don't have the energy. But then you have this inner conflict with your own values, that internal values piece of actually that doesn't sit right with me. And sometimes you then are sitting with this that doesn't sit right with me for a long time before you then have the energy or you decide, right, enough's enough and I'm going to speak up or I'm going to do something. And I think sometimes when you're the only person from that underrepresented group or that only person of colour in a space, you do almost become the champion, the person that has to speak up. And sometimes you feel that, even though no one's saying to you, we want you to be the person that flies the flag, but you feel that and you feel that pressure sometimes. And so I think for me, the sort of that journey to authenticity took a long time. And so what I do now in my coaching space is to help people to get there quicker. Because for me, it took a lot of years and a lot of challenges, a lot of, knockbacks, a lot of not getting what you deserve. And people use that analogy of you have to work twice as hard. Well, actually, that's the fallacy. You have to work 3, 4, 5, 6 times as hard, always having to prove yourself, your worth, your value. And so for me, it was a long journey. It wasn't a quick thing. It was a long journey. And I think for me in that journey, what I realized as I kind of went through it was that it was my authenticity that then gave me that power, knowing who I was, what I stood for, what I believed in, and why certain things were important to me. So values led really helped me to cement who I was. Because I think sometimes it's a bit like a ship being buffeted in the wind when you're in an environment that can be hostile or is not quite, you are the only one, or, and that kind of thing. You can sometimes, there's lots of forces going on around you, and you can kind of shift. Oh, I need to fit in here if I want to succeed, or I need to be there if I want to get on. And so I think sometimes you lose who you are because you're so busy focusing on trying to please the people in front of you that you forget that actually your power comes from who you actually are and the difference that you bring. And so for me, it was that learning to believe in myself and the sort of the self-belief that I know who I am, I know what my value is, and I'm going to push through no matter what. I'm here and I am getting what I deserve. So it's that kind of thing.
So how did you make those moments of challenge, learning and growth, rather than being taken as a challenge in a negative way?
I mean, I wouldn't say that originally I didn't take it in a negative way. And I think there are times when your kind of resilience levels are low. And so you do take things in a more negative or a more personal way. But I think in the longer term, I adapted the mindset that actually everything that was happening to me was happening for me. And what I found was that those challenges, whilst they were challenges and some of the setbacks and the knockbacks, actually, every time I grew that little bit more, and every time I became much more of the person I wanted to be. And so a lot of those challenges that I had were actually the challenges that then defined the leader that I turned out to be. They were the things that meant that I had the resilience to keep pushing when others had given up. When I left policing at the time, I was one of only 3 senior most females in the UK. And I think, well, I didn't get there because I was the best out of every Black police officer or woman of colour police officer in the country. But I got there because of that determination, because of that resilience, and because I built up that self-belief in this is who I am, this is what I'm about. And actually, you might not see it yet, but I know that I will be a good leader. I know that this is what the organisation needs to move it forward. For me, it is that thing about once you understand who you are and once you understand what it is you have to give, then it's almost like nothing can stand in your way. And that's that bit about the mindset that life is going to throw challenges at you. I think Buddhists believe that life is about challenge. That is part of the purpose of challenge. And Japanese, they have this brilliant custom where when things get broken, they fix it with gold. That gets interwoven into it to show the magic of sort of imperfection and challenge. And that's where most growth happens. So again, I think there is a mindset thing about how we see challenges. And I think a lot of people see challenges as that's the end of the journey, as opposed to challenge is the journey. This is what I'm meant to go through to be the end product. And so I think that was the sort of the mindset, the mental shaping that I had that enabled me to keep going.
And what about your colleagues? When there were teachable moments for your colleagues, how did you package that in a way where they would learn, not feel challenged?
So for me, there's this thing about I believe you can say anything to anybody if you say it in the right way. And so one of the things that I would always do, and I still do now, is meet people where they are, not where I am or where I expect them to be. And so, and I think it's doing it in the moment that's important. If you leave it for an hour or 2 hours or a few days, it becomes difficult. How do I go back and broach this subject again? Or how do I say that, look, that's not acceptable, or this is something that, you could have done differently, or how did you see what happened there? If you do it in the moment and actually use it as an opportunity to say, oh, did you notice that X, Y, and Z happened just a moment ago? Or for me, that felt a little bit like, just use it as an opportunity. And I think also using stories, using examples, doing it in a way that's not threatening, in a way that's not about you are bad, I am good, you are wrong, I am right. And coming from, I suppose I come from a standpoint of people want to do the right thing. They just sometimes don't know how, or sometimes they might be a bit clumsy about what they say and what they do and how they do it. And I think back then, there was a culture anyway that needed to change and that needed educating. So I think it was less about you're totally in the wrong here and more about actually that's not acceptable. It's not acceptable to talk like that or act like that or be like that or what have you. But doing it in a way that is more about let us get on, let us talk about this, let us collaborate and not be pointy fingery. That wasn't my job. For me, I wasn't the professional standards person that was doing that role where it's got to admonish people. And I also think that within this space, if you alienate people, you don't bring them with you and you don't move them forward. So I think sometimes there is a case for it isn't about discipline and losing jobs. And that's not that I'm saying there isn't a place for that, because of course there is. But I think sometimes we've gone down a road of it's all or nothing. It has to be a dismissible offence or what have you. And sometimes it is born out of ignorance. It is born out of actually I didn't know what to say and I was clumsy. And so I think there needs to be more of a defined line in terms of what's really outrageous and bad and what is just a learning moment that people need to have.
I really like the expression bringing people along, because that's starting to understand people. And as you were talking, I was getting a sense of building relationships with people and seeing them as human beings. And they've had their own journey, not necessarily a journey where they were helped to understand that certain things are not acceptable, helped to understand that the kind of culture that they're in is quite toxic. And I suppose in that system, some places there were toxic cultures that were perpetuated by certain people and nobody actually challenged it. And until you challenge it, then people are going to think it's okay and they're going to whatever happens in the workplace. And because your industry was people facing, they would take that out into the work that they were doing on the ground, which became very frustrating, I'm sure, for those people who came into contact with it. But what's really interesting is that you had that concept of bringing people along and helping them to learn. And I'm sure when you have talked to them and made them understand that they are people and the people they're talking to are people, that together that you can make it a different culture. You can build a different culture. Thank you for that.
I just wanted to add on to there as well that the thing about culture is when you're in it, it's not as easy to see. So when you're actually ensconced in that culture and the behaviours that you are sort of indoctrinated into, it's not as easy to see that actually this is a toxic culture because you're in it and everybody's doing it and it seems like it's normal. So, and that's not to take away that people don't know right or wrong, but you know, there's like a metaphor of two goldfish swimming in a goldfish bowl, and one says don't drink the water and the other one says what's the water. You know, it's like when you're in it and it's all around you don't necessarily see, and that's why having difference within organizations and things like that does help people to see, because I'm not talking about the obvious stuff. I'm talking about those sort of the microaggressions and those smaller things that happen that if you're in it and these things are going on, you don't realize that it's happening. So I think it's important to, I guess, to understand that the trouble with culture is it's what you know and you don't think about anything outside of the culture.
Before you were talking about inner work, and you spoke about some of the things that you had to do in order to go on that journey and come out the other side. What were some of the specific things that you had to navigate in order to develop that inner journey and come out the other side?
Well, I love learning, and I'm one of those people, I tend not to read storybooks. I'm all theory, and I love reading about theory. And I guess my journey started with NLP, neuro linguistic programming. And when I used to work with the police recruits, and we had a training session from someone around NLP. And that was the first time that I suppose I'd really thought about that inner work or done anything on that kind of inner dialogue, the sort of the limiting beliefs and the things that we tell ourselves every day that actually are imprinting more of the negative behaviors or the negative feelings or beliefs about ourselves. Even something about labeling yourself and, oh, I'm not a confident person, or, oh, I'm not very confident. And the impact that that has on your nervous system, on your thought processes and patterns, just by constantly telling yourself those things. So that was the first time when I'd actually really started to understand the power of the mind, and what you tell your mind is basically what your reality is. And so it started there, and then I got hooked, and I just loved everything about that kind of, you know, the psychology and the thinking about mindset and belief and impacts that it has. And then coaching, being coached myself and mentored, having a mentor. And so I think there's a difference as well between the coaching for self and that inner work that needs to be done. And I definitely lacked, because I would say I lacked self-belief, but I was a confident person. You know, so I had confidence in myself, but I lacked that belief in me and what I could achieve.
Yeah.
And I think part of it was to do with growing up. I didn't realize I had dyslexia, and then it was only in my 40s that I found out I had dyslexia. So I kind of grew up always thinking I'm not as intelligent as everybody else. And so it was only later on that then finding out I was dyslexic and then learning, okay, this is how I need to study, this is how I need to read or to take information in, etc., that I then really started to, I suppose, excel academically. And I think, and there is an academic snobbery in this country. If you've got a master's degree or a degree or what have you, then there is, you sort of, it opens more doors, or people sort of respond better to it. So I had that kind of thing, which impacted on my self-belief. And then I think there were things about the mentoring side of things, which was more about the job and what I needed to do with the job and how I needed to kind of what I needed to learn and those sorts of things. So I guess that journey was twofold, with mentoring and with coaching. And a lot of self-work, a lot of reading. I became sort of almost obsessed with every kind of, not just self-help books, but learning about the different theories and the different things. And then I did a life coaching course myself. And so that then helps because you have to go through a process of self-exploration, but you also go through a process of coaching others. And I think there's a real depth, a real magic, and a real opportunity for learning and growth when you coach and mentor others, because you learn so much about yourself, you learn so much about other people, and you learn so much about how people navigate challenges. You're helping people to navigate their challenges, and then that's always filling your cup, I would say. So I guess the journey was a lot of self development, and I think there's a mindset thing as well about the importance of you. And I think a lot of people, especially women, put everybody else first. It's the family, it's the children, it's the employer, it's the boss, it's the job, it's I need to be the carer, the giver, the what have you. And so many women think that it's selfish to think about themselves. It's selfish to look after themselves and to get what they need. And so I think that was a real part of that as well, was learning that actually to want to spend time on me or to better myself is the reward for everybody. The legacy that leaves is far greater than if I just burn myself into the ground. But I think there were a lot of mindset shifts that took place in that journey as well, in terms of how I viewed myself, my position and my place in society, but in life as well.
Yeah.
And I think some of that work was about accepting and acknowledging that I was probably going to be the first, and that's okay as well, because I think sometimes we go into things and we're led, like I said, you get buffered almost like the wind sort of pushes you in different directions. But I think I got to a stage where I realized, well, I'm not going to see the person in front of me. Do you know what I mean? I'm not going to see that person ahead of me to say that's who I aspire to. So if I want these things, if I want to be a leader, if I want to be successful, then I'm going to have to be that first person.
Yeah.
And not be looking for that role model to be there that's going to inspire me. So again, I think just that mindset shift in terms of, you hear that thing, don't you? If you can't see it, you can't be it. And I kind of always challenge that a little bit to say, yes, we need role models and you need to see people in positions, but actually there's always a first. And someone has to be that first. And that person didn't have the trailblazer or the person in front of them. And so I guess there's something about, rather than thinking if you can't be it, you can't see it, think more about, if I can't see it, how can I be it? If that's the journey, if that's the path that you think that you're on.
Wow, there's so much to unpack there. But we've got a few minutes left, and there's just a couple of questions that I'd like to ask you. So, what does liberation mean to you? So, beyond the professional success, how would you hope that these stories inspire others to lead differently?
So I think for me, liberation is that sense of that challenges are there and you're going to have challenges. But for me, that liberation is the freedom that you have within, the freedom to express who you are in the way that you're comfortable expressing yourself. That liberation for me is being true to your values and living and working and being authentic in what you do. So that's what I would say that liberation is. The challenges are there, but it's how you liberate yourself to know that it's okay. And also that liberation is about, it's okay to cry sometimes. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to be angry. It's okay to be fed up and frustrated, but not to allow that to consume you and define you. The liberation is freeing yourself to say, do you know what, today I'm not choosing to be angry. I'm choosing to be motivated, determined, and I'm going to carry on and get on.
That's very inspiring for leaders as well, to feel that freedom to be themselves, as you were talking about authenticity as well, to be yourself in the situation, because people respond to people. They don't respond to a masking or anything like that. They respond to people. So that's very interesting. Thank you for that. So what positive takeaway would you like to tell our audience today?
So the one takeaway, or the takeaway I'd like to give, is that when you stand firm in your authenticity, when you stand firm in your values, and you have that belief and that commitment in who you are, that for me is when you can stand firm in your power and your pride. And that's how you can fit into spaces that maybe feel like they aren't meant for you. That's how you can excel in places that maybe weren't designed for you. And for me, that's where that true liberation comes from, which is that ability to know your values, be true to your values, understand who you are as a person, and then that ability to be able to then be you, be authentic, and live by your authenticity and not allow the world around you to move you into something that maybe you don't want to be or that you don't think is right for you. And to do the work, commit to you and to do the work for you so that you can have that transformation that gives you what you want to be and what you need and deserve out of life.
Thank you for being our guest today and sharing your story, that powerful story of liberation and leadership, and how reclaiming your power begins within. And it's not about seeking permission, but it's just rooted in who you are. Thank you.
Thank you.